Chapter 2. The Listener. The waters sang with human voices, and Senne listened. She hung suspended in her monitoring alcove, 3,000 meters below the surface world, her body cradled by currents the great pumps maintained at precisely the temperature and salinity her kind had evolved to prefer. Around her, bioluminescent panels pulsed in the slow rhythms of data transfer. Blue for shipping traffic, green for weather systems, amber for military movements. The colors played across her skin, and she absorbed them through receptors humans would have called scales. Listening was her function, had been for 600 years, since she completed her training and took her place among the monitors. A young role, as her people measured such things. The elder remembered when the first human vessels crossed the waters above, fragile things of bound reeds and desperate courage. Senne remembered only the last few centuries of their development, their multiplication, their noise. So much noise. She extended her awareness through the Refugium sensor network, container ships, fishing trawlers, military submarines playing their eternal games. The electromagnetic whispers of human civilization pressed against her receptors like weather. Portuguese vessels, or maybe Spanish. The humans maintained their territorial markers even underwater. Routine. All of it routine. She should have felt comfort in that. The warden certainly would have. Routine meant safety. Routine meant the great hiding continued undisturbed. Routine meant another day when her people did not have to make the terrible choices that haunted their history. But Senne felt something else. Something she had learned not to name, because naming it would make it real, and real things could be noticed. The closest approximation in human language, she had learned from her studies, might be restless, though humans used that word for brief discomforts. Minutes, hours. She had been restless for centuries. A new signal caught her attention. Faint. Different. She adjusted her receptors, filtering out the background roar of human civilization, the constant electromagnetic scream that had grown so much louder in even her short lifetime. There. A communications fragment, bouncing off the ionosphere, degraded but recoverable. Confirmed the coordinates. Northwestern sector of the plateau. Pescatori insists the formations are. The transmission scattered into noise. Senne reached for more, her body shifting in the monitoring alcove as she redirected sensor clusters toward the source. Nothing. The fragment had been a stray reflection, a momentary clarity in the chaos of human communications. But she had heard enough. Plateau formations. She felt her chromatophores flicker involuntarily, a ripple of cold blue spreading across her flanks. An emotional tell. Undisciplined. She suppressed it, but not before the monitoring chamber's ambient systems registered the change. Humans had looked at the plateau before. Many times. Their sonar swept across the seabed with increasing resolution, decade by decade, mapping the volcanic features and hydrothermal vents that made this region geologically interesting to their limited understanding. They had looked and seen nothing significant. Because her people had been careful. The old city's ruins were buried under 12 millennia of sediment, masked by carefully maintained acoustic baffles, hidden by the same technology that kept the refugium itself invisible. The installations were safe. They had always been safe. Pescatori insists the formations are formations, plural, specific. Someone was not merely looking, someone was finding. Senne recorded the fragment, encrypted it according to protocol, and prepared her report. The council would need to know, the warden certainly, and the mender, who had been warning for decades that human technology was advancing faster than their concealment strategies could adapt. She felt the thing she did not name stir in her again. Not fear, something else. Something that tasted like the moment before the great pumps shifted cycle, when everything hung suspended between states. Anticipation, her mind supplied, drawing on her studies of human emotional taxonomy. She rejected the word. It implied desire for a particular outcome. She was merely observing, reporting, doing her function. The council chamber lay in the Refugium's deepest level, carved from the living basalt by ancestors who had fled here when the world above drowned. Senne descended through pressure gradients that would have crushed any human vessel, her body adjusting automatically to each transition. The architecture shifted as she went deeper, from the functional efficiency of the monitoring levels to something older, stranger. Walls that curved in ways that felt right to her people's geometry, but would have disturbed human spatial perception. Bioluminescent patterns that contained meaning, history, warning. She passed other members of her kind in the transit corridors, a tender adjusting the nutrient flow in a cultivation chamber. Two younglings, barely a millennium old, playing some game that involved rapid color shifts and what humans would have called laughter. An elder, so ancient that their bioluminescence had faded to a constant dim glow, being guided by a caretaker toward the rest pools. No one spoke to her. Listeners did not socialize casually. They carried too many secrets, absorbed too much of the surface world's contaminating signals. The other roles kept a respectful distance, and Senne had learned not to mind the isolation. She minded. Of course she minded. But minding was another thing she had learned not to name. The council chamber opened before her, and Senne felt her chromatophores flatten into the formal neutrality required for an official report. 3 figures waited in the speaking positions. The warden hung at the chamber's security node, his bulk casting shadows across the bioluminescent floor maps. 8,000 years had made him patient and paranoid in equal measure. He had lived through the last time humans came too close, in the era they called antiquity, when certain of their philosophers had begun to suspect the truth. That incident had been contained. The warden intended all future incidents to be contained as well. The mender floated at the ecological station, her body networked into the Refugium's life support displays. She was older than the warden by 4 millennia, old enough to remember the catastrophe as a child. The drowning, the flight, the terrible decision to hide rather than fight. She wore that memory in the patterns of her skin, scar markings that never fully faded. And at the chamber's center, barely visible in the dim illumination reserved for the most ancient, the elder waited. 47,000 years. Senne could not truly comprehend that span. The elder had been adult when her people still lived on the surface, when the great cities stood proud above the waves, when the sky held a different moon in a different position. The elder rarely spoke anymore. Processing took too long. But the elder's presence was required for any decision that touched on the old times. Listener Senne. The warden's voice was a subsonic rumble, felt more than heard. You signaled urgency. Report. She pulsed her findings into the chamber's shared medium, the data spreading through the water as modulated pressure waves that all present could absorb directly. The communication fragment, the analysis, the implications. Silence, for a long moment. Then the warden's chromatophores flickered dismissive orange. One fragment, corrupted. You cannot even identify the source. The specific terminology, Senne said, keeping her own colors carefully neutral. Plateau formations. This is not standard oceanographic language. Someone has seen something specific and is discussing it through channels they believe are secure. Humans discuss many things through many channels. They are constantly looking. It is their nature. The warden shifted, his massive body creating subtle currents in the chamber's water. They have looked at the plateau 17 times in the past decade alone. Their sonar resolution improves, yes. Their curiosity is constant, and they find what they have always found, nothing. The Menes Gwen surveys last month, Senne pressed. German vessel. I noted anomalous dwell time over the northwestern sector. Hydrothermal research, their stated mission parameters. They lingered, longer than thermal mapping would require. The warden's response was a burst of dismissive violet. Humans linger, they are inefficient. This proves nothing. Senne felt the restless thing coil tighter in her core. She turned toward the mender, seeking an ally she was not sure she had. The mender's colors shifted thoughtfully, her patterns cycling through analytic sequences. The acoustic baffles in the northwestern sector, she said slowly. When were they last calibrated? The warden flickered irritation. The maintenance cycles are within acceptable parameters. That is not what I asked. A pause. The warden consulted something, his chromatophores going briefly dim with the effort of accessing archived information. 37 years. The last calibration was 37 years ago. And in those 37 years, the mender continued, human sonar resolution has improved by what factor? Another pause. Longer this time. Significant improvement, the warden admitted, but the baffles were designed with considerable margin. Designed, the mender said, by engineers who could not have predicted the rate of human technological advancement. We assumed centuries. They have given us decades. She turned toward Senne, and her color softened into something almost approaching warmth. You were correct to bring this to us, listener. The fragment may mean nothing, but the pattern it suggests deserves attention. The warden's bulk shifted again, agitation in every line of his posture. The pattern it suggests is the same pattern we have seen for centuries. Humans look, humans wonder, humans eventually look somewhere else. We do not need to risk exposure for every stray signal that mentions the plateau. And if this time is different? It is never different. They are not capable of being different. They are children, Mender. Clever children with dangerous toys, yes, but children nonetheless. They cannot find what we do not wish them to find. The warden's color shifted, cycling through older patterns. You were not there for the Thera incident. I was. Hasty action nearly destroyed us then. 6 of our scouts dead, because someone decided to make contact before the protocols were established. Caution has kept us alive for 12 millennia. I will not abandon it for a corrupted signal fragment. The argument was old. Senne had heard variations of it in archived council sessions dating back millennia. The warden's faction believed in the permanence of human limitation. The mender's faction believed in the inevitability of human growth. Both sides had evidence. Neither had certainty. And in the middle, always, the elder waited. Senne had never heard the elder speak. She had viewed recordings, of course. Historical fragments from the deep archives. A voice that seemed to come from some other age of the world, carrying harmonics that modern vocal structures could no longer produce. But in her 600 years as a listener, in her dozens of council reports, the elder had only watched, processed, remembered, until now. The elder moved. A slight shift, barely perceptible, but in the chamber's stillness it felt like a seismic event. Ancient chromatophores flickered, patterns emerging from deep tissue that had not fired in decades. Not words, not yet. Something older, memory colors, story patterns. Senne watched, transfixed, as images formed in the elder's skin. A city. The city. The old city, as it had once been. Spires reaching toward a younger sun. Streets filled with her people, thousands of them, millions, moving through air and water with equal ease. And above, a sky that held no moon. The images shifted. Fire. Water. The sky screaming as something fell. The great waves that followed. And then the flight. The desperate dive into the deep places. The sealing of doors that would never open again. The elder's voice, when it finally came, was barely a whisper. A frequency so low that Senne felt it more in her bones than in her hearing. They found us then, the elder said. Not these humans, their ancestors. The ones who shared the surface with us before the fire. They found us and they feared us, and we tried to teach them, and they were not ready. A long pause, colors cycling through grief patterns, older than human civilization. The fire came before we could try again, and after, there was nothing left to try with, only the hiding. We hid to protect them as much as ourselves. But hiding cannot last forever. Nothing lasts forever. The warden's colors flickered uncertain yellow for the first time. Elder, with respect, the protocol has served us well for 12,000 years. 12,000 years is nothing. The elder's voice grew slightly stronger, ancient harmonics resonating through the chamber. I remember when we thought the hiding would last 2 generations, 3 at most, until the humans forgot their fear, and we forgot our failure. But humans do not forget. They write things down. They tell stories. They look. The elder's attention shifted, and Senne felt the weight of 47 millennia focusing on her. You intercepted this signal. What do you believe it means? Senna's chromatophores wanted to flare with the emotion she could not name. She held them steady through force of will. I believe someone has found something they were not supposed to find, she said. I believe they are communicating about it through channels they hope are secure. And I believe— She paused, feeling the warden's disapproval and the mender's careful interest and the elder's ancient patience. I believe we need to know more before we can decide what it means. The elder was still for a long moment. Then, slowly, colors shifted into the pattern of ascent. The listener speaks wisdom, the elder said. We do not have enough information. Therefore, listener Senne will gather more. Those ancient eyes turned toward the warden, and something in their depths made even that massive figure shrink slightly. This is not negotiable. Track the source of this communication. Determine what they have found and what they intend. Report daily. The warden's colors flickered through several shades of protest before settling into reluctant compliance. As the elder commands, but this is reconnaissance only, no contact, no exposure. We observe from a distance, as we have always observed. For now, the mender said quietly. We observe for now. The council session ended with formal color exchanges that Senne performed automatically, her mind already racing through the implications of her new assignment. Track the source. Determine what they have found. The words felt like permission, which was dangerous. Permission suggested desire. Desire suggested the thing she did not name. She exited the council chamber and began the long ascent toward the monitoring levels, her body adjusting to the decreasing pressure with the ease of long practice. Around her, the Refugium's corridors pulsed with their eternal rhythms. Life support, data transfer, the slow heartbeat of a civilization that had learned to survive by becoming invisible. Ascending through the transit corridor, she paused at one of the ancient murals that lined the deeper sections. A scene from before the catastrophe, rendered in pigments that still glowed after 12 millennia. Her people and humans, standing together under an open sky. The image was titled, in the old script, What Was. There was a companion mural somewhere in the archives, Senne knew. She had seen references to it, but never the thing itself. It was titled What May Be, and it had been sealed away during the great argument that followed the decision to hide. Too dangerous, the wardens of that era had decided. Too hopeful. Hope led to risk, and risk led to exposure, and exposure led to the fire and the drowning and the death of everything they had built. But the mural still existed. Sealed, yes. Hidden, yes. But not destroyed. Some things even her cautious people could not bring themselves to destroy. Senne reached the monitoring alcove and settled back into position, extending her awareness once more into the sensor network. The electromagnetic whispers of the surface world washed over her. Container ships, fishing vessels, military submarines. The constant roar of human civilization pressing against the hiding places her people had maintained since before human history began. Somewhere up there, someone named Pescatori was discussing formations. Specific, plural, focused. She began to search signal patterns, communication networks, the fragmentary traces that would lead her back to the source. The work would take time, days perhaps, weeks, but she had time. Her people thought in millennia, and if she felt something that might have been excitement, something that her studies of human emotions suggested was anticipation, she did not name it. She was merely doing her function, listening, observing, tracking, the way she had always done, the way she would continue to do until something changed, or until she chose to change it. Outside the Refugium, In the crushing darkness of the deep Atlantic, the ruins of the old city waited beneath their 12,000 years of sediment. And above, on the surface world that Senne had never touched, humans were beginning to ask questions that had no safe answers. The listener listened. And somewhere in her core, in the place where her people kept the feelings they did not name, a restlessness stirred. It felt like the moment before the great pump's shifted cycle, like the edge of everything changing. She let it stir. She did not suppress it. That, perhaps, was the first small rebellion. There would be others.
This is the oldest country. I'm releasing it as serialized audio. If you want to continue, follow or subscribe.